Greetings. Now, did the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings paint their spear shafts? Now, as you can see in my hand, I have what you describe as either a spear or a javelin. In this case, because it's so small in the length of the handle or the shaft or the haft, I will describe it as a javelin. But would they actually paint their handles? Although I do not know of any archaeological evidence for this, I've certainly seen it on re-enactments, and certainly in the earlier periods where warriors will paint their handles with more elaborate colours than what I have. This is just a whitewash made from lime wash, which I put on, and then I went over with some beeswax after it's dried. And there's a good reason for doing it. It preserves the wooden handle, it preserves the shaft, and make sure that you have longevity on your item. And it also looks nice, and I do like the plain white look. In some point in the future I may paint it red or blue with some stripes, like I often seen with the earlier Viking stuff, or sometimes the earlier Anglo-Saxon spears I've seen. But is there any archaeological evidence for painting spear shafts? Well, that's one of the things we don't know, because simply we don't find spear shafts often. Although certainly where the item is residing in Norway and Iceland, they are finding spear shafts. But whether there's any evidence of painted spear shafts is another thing. But also, let's also, talk about whether they varnished handles or shafts or hafts, depending on what you call it. This is a spear shaft, whereas a handle is more for an axe. So would they varnish them? Now, when we think about varnish, we often think about modern varnishes today, or even wood dyes. But they would use beeswax, and they would also use linseed oil. So you could get your shaft after you made it and put it on your spear, or you put your spear on your shaft, or your javelin end, very much like one of these, or even one of these. And then you could linseed it up to give it some moisture and protect it. And then you can get some beeswax, and then you could cover it with beeswax to give it that waxy coating, but also that protection. And you could also mix the two ingredients up and heat them up slightly to make another concoction out of the linseed oil and the beeswax. And that's something I've got to really think about researching and having a look at, and perhaps then we could demonstrate making some around the open fire. But it is an interesting question. As you can see on this one here, this is just being coated with beeswax. It's an old ash handle, but it's not very straight. Compared to this one, which is very straight indeed. Do spear shafts have to be straight? Well, for battle reenactments, I would fundamentally say yes. If I took that on camp, I would probably get pulled up and saying, well, you can't use that. The handle and the shaft isn't correct. Whereas I could probably get away with this because it's a straight handle, and this is a handle from an old broom I had in my house, which I wasn't using, and it fitted the spear very nicely. And another common question we often get in the videos is, why do you have a little ball at the end of your spear? Well, this is here for safety, so that when we're using it in combat, and I'm using it one-handed with a shield, when I hit somebody in the body, it's not going to stick in. So it's not sharp, it's blunt. And the reason why you have this little nodule at the end, so that it gives some protection, because even though you may still have a non-blunt spear, if you didn't have one of these little nodules at the end put on, and generally it's welded on, it could still hurt somebody. So that's why we have that. And I've just been running my hand along this spear, and I noticed there's a bit of a burr there which would fail an inspection by a master at arms or a training officer. So I'd have to get a file and take that off before the battle. And also, because I'm not riveted this on so far, it's just got some tacks, I'd have to actually do a proper job and rivet this spear onto the end of the shaft properly. So that's a little bit of talk about spears and shafts. And I find shafts to be an amazing thing. And of course you can decorate them as well. And some of the very nice samples we do know of are decorated. And you could put runes on it if you really wanted to. You could have a bit of leather at the end for a grip. There's a lot of things we don't really know about spear shafts, but what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them in the comments section. So please do leave a comment on spears and javelins, because we often think about spears, but we often forget about javelins, and they're both equally useful on the battlefield. Yes, this is for close-up combat in a shield wall, but this is for when the battle is commencing and the shield walls are forming together, and then I can throw this over the enemy shield wall and hopefully take some guy out who, you know, and that'll be one less Anglo-Saxon on the battlefield to kill. So yes, so having, you know, I'm carrying 2 or 3 you know, javelins into battle and using them before you get to your sidearm or even a spear. I mean, it's a little bit of a push having 3 javelins on a spear, but you could do it. You could carry those into battle, and then you could simply throw those 3 over the enemy shield wall to try to take out somebody. I mean, if you get 1 person taken out of 3 and you got 1,000 men doing it, you could cause a lot of damage, but of course they're also doing the same thing to you. So spear shafts and spears and javelins are such a wonderful item and a wonderful weapon of the medieval age. Goodbye from me. I love them. Love them, I love a spear.